In our daily lives, we often encounter situations where people overstep boundaries and subject others to abuse. Be it false, this raises an important question. Should there be a limit to such behavior? Should there be a clearly defined boundary, one that allows a certain degree of expression, but draws a firm line beyond which no one is permitted to go? Can such a limit be defined? A red line, that signal, this is where tolerance ends? Or is it impossible to set any limit at all? Do you think limits are essential? Probably yes. Everything in life requires boundaries, and without them, disorder prevails. If no limits exist, people will feel free to mistreat others without restraint, crossing ethical and emotional boundaries with ease. Therefore, it is necessary to establish limits in all aspects of life. At the same time, individuals must reflect on their own capacity for tolerance, how much mistreatment they are willing to endure. Is it reasonable to expect someone to continuously ignore abuse and remain silent? Or does dignity demand that a line be drawn? We live in a time that rarely celebrates restraint. Power is admired when it expands, not when it pauses. Emotions are applauded when they are loud, not when they are measured. Progress, we are told, lies in pushing boundaries, social, political, personal, often without asking whether some boundaries exist for a reason. Yet every week's headlines tell a similar story. Institutions collapse under unchecked authority. Leaders fall not because they lacked power, but because they exceeded its moral limit. Relationships fracture not due to absence of emotion, but because emotion was allowed to overflow without wisdom. Excess, not scarcity, has quietly become our most common failure. Philosophically, limits have never been signs of weakness. In classical thought, limits defined harmony. Even nature functions through balance. Too much rain floods, too little starves. Human life is no different. Emotion without limits turns destructive. Freedom without limits erodes responsibility. Modern culture, however, often treats limits as obstacles. To place a limit is seen as fear. To question expansion is labeled resistance. But history disagrees. Every lasting civilization understood that endurance requires boundaries, ethical, emotional, and institutional. The absence of limits does not create strength. It creates instability. Power, in particular, demands restraint. Philosophers from Plato to Hannah Arendt warn that power detached from moral limits stops serving people and begins consuming them. Today's world does not suffer from a lack of power, it suffers from power that refuses to listen, pause, or step back. The same is true of emotions. While emotional honesty is essential, emotional absolutism is not. When anger is allowed to rule unchecked, justice is replaced by revenge. When love demands possession rather than respect, it suffocates. When ambition ignores consequence, it leaves damage behind and calls it success. Emotions, like fire, bring warmth when controlled and destruction when unleashed. This is not an argument for suppression, silence, or fear. Limits are not cages. They are frameworks that give meaning to action. A river flows because it has banks. Without them, it becomes a flood. Human life, too, flows best when guided by conscious restraint. What will happen to human body if excess dosage of a medicine is taken? The real question, then, is not whether there should be limits, but who defines them and how honestly they are enforced. A just limit is rooted in responsibility, not control. A wise limit protects dignity rather than crushing possibility. When limits are rejected without reflection, chaos follows. In an age obsessed with more, perhaps, maturity lies in asking a quieter question: where should we stop? Not because we cannot go further, but because going further may cost us what makes life humane. Wisdom, after all, is not the absence of power or emotion, it is the courage to place a limit where conscience demands one. The end. Isn't it necessary that we put a limit on every action? Don't you think life should also have SOPs? These limits are for the betterment. If so, society would gradually move towards improvement and conditions would become better for everyone.